10 million years in the making. The truth, the whole truth, and everything but the truth. History of the World, Part 1. Welcome back to Entertainment Rebooted. Specifically, welcome back to another episode of Cinema Revisited Mel Brooks, where we are watching the majority of the films made by legendary filmmaker Mel Brooks. Who would have thought? I am, of course, joined by my esteemed co-host, the one and only DJ. Say hi to the camera, DJ.
Hello, camera.
Okay, DJ, so we watched History of the World Part 1. We're going to talk about the plot. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the iconic, and then talk about perhaps if there is some kind of way that we could make a film of a similar style for a modern day audience. Something that we've had difficulty with, but we've somehow always managed to kind of squeeze in there at the end. Speaking of squeezing things in, give us a brief plot summary of History of the World Part 1, if you would, DJ.
Well, it's a summary of the history of the world.
To an extent. It does start at the dawn of time.
Ooh, sorry. I made myself laugh there. Okay, so History of the World Part 1 is an anthology film where it has several, was it 5 or 6 segments?
Dawn of Man, Stone Age, Rome, Inquisition, French Revolution. So 5.
5? Was it really only 5?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So, yeah.
Well, technically 4 because, like, Dawn of Man and Stone Age are kind of...
That's true. Okay, so that's it. They start out short and they get a little longer as they go. And then they kind of... it peaks at Rome and then comes back down. So it kind of gives a little bit of humoresque approach to the Stone Age. It gives... then it talks about the Roman Empire... Oh, it does a brief snippet of Moses.
Yes.
Yeah. It does the Roman Empire, which is a large swath of the center of the film, and then it does a musical number on the Inquisition, and then it moves into the French Revolution, which is where it ends.
Yep.
The French Revolution does a little bit of a twist on the Prince and the Pauper as well, mixed in with that. That's basically it. It's just it's just daily life and the characters in those worlds with a lot of humor added in. It actually reminds me quite a bit of 12 Chairs. It's very much a similar style where it's just showing people living their lives with humor interjected in, like, around what's going on.
Yeah, but unlike 12 Chairs, it's definitely much more of a skit-based comedy.
Yes.
Where they have a lot of different scenes. It's very much humor-based.
And it is seen within the scenes because it has, like, it'll focus on Rome and there'll be like 14 different sets. It does set pieces. Like, it does a set piece, it sets the joke, completes the joke, moves on to the next thing. Yep. It's not only is the whole thing an anthology throughout the film, but each of the individual ages and eras that it hits is small anthologies within that.
Yeah. Different little sketches and stuff throughout.
Yep,
so
exactly. It's a sketch comedy film.
Yep.
It's actually kind of reminiscent of, I mean, they did it later, but similar to other things like Monty Python have done this too, where it's, they break it up into pieces with little humor bits.
Yeah, it's much more of like a Life of Brian kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
Where it takes like a historical thing, but it makes a completely just ludicrous story off the side of it.
Yep.
Yep. That's a good way to summarize it. It's a fairly fun movie, very solidly done, lots of humor, lots of famous clips and stuff like that. I think that this and some of the more modern ones are probably the ones that get most of the clips outside of Blazing Saddles. As far as
Blazing Saddles is another one that gets especially for the type of humor this is.
Yeah. All right, let's get into it then. Let's talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, the iconic. What is in your opinion good about History of the World Part 1?
So one of the things I really like about this is the way that they frame the historical moments with the humor bits. Funny enough, this is probably one of the, like, most historically accurate, like, set pieces I've ever seen. The detail in, like, the Roman armor and the different positions having different styles of armor and different for, like, the Roman guards and then the soldiers and then they all have different outfits, different shields, different, like, the attention to detail is insane. It's
it's especially insane because it's like you can also tell that they're on a budget while they're making it, but they still manage to get these little details.
They work so hard on like a parody film to like make it look like, and it's part of the humor is that Mel Brooks does in a lot of his films, but especially in this one, is anachronisms, right? They do a lot of anachronisms, and they do that in this one. But some of the anachronisms are really, really slyly, like barely in the background. And there's a scene where Mel Brooks is in between. He's comicus and doing a stand-up comedy routine in front of the Roman Emperor.
Yep, Caesar.
In front of Caesar, and in the background you can see like members of the Senate and things like that and stuff. And then like in the midst of them, there's like the critic that they had from the caveman is back there, like standing amongst the crowd as the critic, and he's still in like his stone. He's all raggedy, like he's still the Stone Age critic. And just like it's like there's like super historically accurate. And then they have like this one guy walking with a boombox next to his ear, making fun of like the anachronisms are just so hilarious when they spent so much time, attention to detail. That's just solid, absolutely solid. It's part of the reason that made Blazing Saddles work so well. The anachronisms work really, really well when you are really, really solid on your like historical placing and piecing.
Yeah, it stands out more. It makes them more humorous.
It makes them hilarious.
It just kind of it lets it shine.
Yep,
a little bit more.
It stands out. Yep.
Let's see. Good. I'd probably say that the pacing. One thing that has been an issue with some of the Mel Brooks movies, specifically like 12 Chairs and stuff like that, is that it does kind of tends to drag between the humor pieces. So a couple of times you'll get a sketch or a skit or something that they do, and it feels very out of place, and then there's a long, drawn-out...
High anxiety and silent movies suffer from that a little bit as well.
Right. This one it's much quicker pace. It's a lot quicker, where it seems like, sometimes it gets a little bit overwhelming where it's just like joke, but it is much faster paced. You're more engaged in it. The movie seems to move a little bit faster, and they move between set pieces very nicely. So by the time you start getting kind of tired of one of the set pieces, they move on to the next one.
Right.
Where they move to another aspect of the story, or they get into something else, some other zany side joke or something that just changes up the pace a bit. But I would say overall the pace is it's very good. It's much more reminiscent of later Mel Brooks. It's probably like his like first real modern parody where it's mostly humor as compared to here's a very funny sketch, here's story, here's another funny sketch.
Right.
A lull. Less lulls, better pace. So
Got it.
How about bad?
They spend they spent way too much time on Rome. The caveman one came across pretty smoothly. Moses gets shoehorned in really fast, and they quickly jump up to Rome, and then they sit in Rome for like half the film. Mm-hmm. And like Rome is good for gay stuff, but then the problem after that is once they leave Rome, everything else after that feels short as well. Yep. So I feel like they should have either balanced them all a little better, or just cut more time out of Rome, or made the film a little longer, done maybe another one or two. They do shoehorn in a little bit at the end, the History Report 2, with some short gags that work really well, but Rome drags on a little long. Like the pacing is really solid. They get to Rome, and Rome is doing really well with the little gags and stuff, and then they have like a pretty long-term plot that burns through it, which is interesting. But it keeps going, and then it keeps going, and then it keeps going, and it's like, okay, where's, are we gonna end in Rome? Like that's sort of starting to feel here, and then it flips to the Inquisition, and then it gets back to like where it was a little better at its pacing at that point.
Yeah,
that was it for me. Like Rome lost me a little bit.
Yeah, I'd say that a bad. Just as much as it really is also a bit of the humor. The chronology is kind of off, where the skit involving the Last Supper is hilarious. It's a great scene, iconic scene in the movie. However, the entire movie up to that point, really, like since they started in Rome, to that skit, they had been referencing Christians. They'd been referencing like the Christians being fed to the lions. No, they don't want me. I'm a Jew. They only eat Christians. You know, they have a very strict diet.
Yeah.
But all of those jokes, all of that humor, even part of his stand-up philosophy sketch was about the Christians. And then they flee and run into the Last Supper.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it's like, that's kind of like,
that actually, yeah.
It is like a nitpick, and it's humorous because it is like, it's out of order. The movie's purposely not accurate, obviously.
Right.
But it is one of those things where it's like, okay, you spent a lot of this time having this kind of humor. Maybe they should have kind of started out. Maybe they could have switched that up. It works, but it doesn't if you really think about it. So it's just bad. It's not ugly. It's kind of bad.
It is an anachronism, but it's actually, my problem with it is it's a little too close to the source material. It happens in Rome out of order. When you did these other anachronisms, you had people with like modern music boxes or like modern references. The anachronisms were more modern, or they referenced other skits. Like they have an Inquisition member members from other skits show up in the background of other skits.
Right.
That one does feel a little odd because you're like, okay, I get it. It's a humorous moment, but it's a little too close to the Roman thing. It would have actually almost been funnier if they did it in like the last one, like the French Revolution, and suddenly they walk into the Last Supper or something where it came out of order, like really out of order. It's almost too close, and it makes it a little difficult to buy into it because you're right. They put a lot of these jokes in on that expense, and then you get to that point, you're like, it almost kills the humor because like that's a little too out of order. Like you have to almost make it really bad.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things. It's bad. It's not really ugly. But what would you say is ugly? What is the thing that somebody going into this hasn't seen History of the World Part 1 before? What is something that you would kind of just warn them about? Like, hey, this is a little bit ugly about the film. Brace yourself. What is something that you would say is
I'm gonna do this again. I know we keep doing this, but it works really well for especially Mel Brooks films. But the ugly and iconic are mixed together, and it's very similar to Blazing Saddles.
Okay.
It is incredibly offensive, but it's meant to be, and that's kind of the point. Like it's the film is just making fun of history out of context.
Yeah.
It pokes fun at religion, culture, and a lot of things that are held in like high esteem, especially Western culture. The Roman Empire is admired a lot by Western culture in general. It's like we consider like the birth of Western civilization is Greece and Rome.
Well, yeah, they even have a bit of a narration where he spends a lot of time glorifying Rome.
Yeah,
like a very stereotypical history overview where Rome, great civilization of the world, Rome,
and then immediately mocks the bejeebies out of it.
Well, and then it's literally like all of the stuff that we always tend to forget about Rome, where it's like, yeah, it's glitzy and glamorous, but oh my gosh, is it corrupt? Oh my gosh, is it disgusting? Wow, these people are like depraved.
Well, that was part of the thing. Like Rome existed for 1,000 years, so they kind of mushed all that 1,000 years of history into one moment. And it's funny, like they do a really good job of showcasing like how like the talking about how they do in every documentary. Rome, like you said, great place. Oh, that's filthy. Like it's like if a documentary talked about how glorified Rome is and then showed its dark underbelly, and like that was clever. Like that's fun kind of stuff. That's iconic. But on the turn of its face, like the depravity of the jokes, there's a lot of like sexual jokes and like dirty stuff that like a lot of people be like, you know, turn your stomach kind of stuff because he's pushing the line. And I'm not saying like
with the sexual stuff, he definitely pushes the line with the French Revolution. Well, it's in line. It's kind of in line with Louis and his reputation.
Yes.
And the reputation of the French people at the time. But it does really push, especially like modern sensibility.
Yes.
It definitely pushes to the point where even I was just kind of like, okay, we kind of get it, dude. Like,
the one thing I can actually relate this to strongly, it actually is a film that came out this past year was Wonka. They had the joke with Peel, where he kept getting like huge, like just fatter and fatter and fatter. It's funny kind of, but they keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. Like, okay, it's funny, but at this point we're like 4 times into this joke. We get it. Give us something else to eat on. It was literally, I think, the only thing I complained about from that film. That's pretty much like Rome, especially, but the last one, like the French Revolution, pushes that pretty hard to the point of like, this isn't as much fun anymore. This is getting a little uncomfortable. Like,
well, and even the Rome stuff is pretty tame compared to like the French Revolution, because in the Rome stuff, most of the stuff was just, it was innuendo. There's one scene where it's,
a lot of play on words. That was a big thing. A lot of play on words.
There's other sketches and stuff like that, but the French Revolution is when it's like, no, they're like grabbing people, they're jumping on people,
it's on the nose, and it's just intense, and it's like it just was a rough one to end on. But the final skit that they do with the replacing the king with the backup king, from there the end works pretty well. Yes, because then the comicness is about this guy is nothing like the king. Like, he's a stand-up person who's just like,
he's a fairly normal guy, where she comes in and she's, oh, ravish me, and all this stuff, and he's just like, oh, why don't we like go to dinner? Let's have a candlelit dinner. Let's have some wine. Let's look at some pictures. Let's get in the mood first. Like, let's have some time to like, let's get to that later. Whereas Louis the entire time is literally just like, oh my gosh, it breathes.
And it's intense. So that's my ugly and iconic. It's two faces, the same ideal. There's some really clever pushing the envelope stuff that's really fun, really enjoyable, especially in the Roman section and the Spanish Inquisition song. That's clever stuff. It's fun. It's offensive, but in a fun way. But then there's that stuff that we're not necessarily pushing the envelope or like messing things up. It's uncomfortable, and it's not really funny anymore. It's just like, I get it. He's a sleaze.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's both of mine. What about you?
Okay, so ugly, iconic.
They don't have to be the same thing like mine were.
Yes.
It's not a rule. We just keep doing it.
Well, you keep doing it. But we do kind of blend it. Well, that tends to happen though with a lot of these movies.
It happens a lot with the Mel Brooks ones, especially because it just, what makes his stuff iconic tends to also make it the kind of stuff people don't want to watch.
Right.
Which is why I put it in the ugly.
Yeah.
If you can't handle offensive humor, this is probably not your thing.
Yeah. It's
Blazing Saddles is the same way. If you don't like offensive humor, this is probably not your movie. Yeah. But if you can stomach offensive humor, you will enjoy this.
Yeah. It does it really, really well.
Yes.
If you can't handle it, you're not going to like it. But if you can handle it, it's iconic.
Yeah.
It's very well
exactly.
done. Yeah. So ugly. I mean, we touched on the sexual stuff. I think that's kind of one of those things I would definitely warn somebody about. I haven't seen this movie since I was in high school, and I remember some of the scenes with like, it's good to be the king, like those lines. I kind of forgot what he does every time before he says it's good to be the king.
And I know, I know that's meant to be. It's meant to make him look like awful, but it does it a little. Yeah. It does it a little too well. Like, I don't need to see it that intensely. I get it. He's a dick. Stop showing it to me.
But I think, let's see, ugly. Shoot.
I think you nailed it on that one.
Well, I would definitely say that I would warn somebody about that. Like, it feels kind of like, I think that's just like me personally in my head, where I'm just like, well, we already kind of talked about it. I need to find something else to just kind of talk about for my 2 minutes in front of the microphone. But that is the thing I would warn somebody about. As far as iconic though, I mean, there's a couple of ways that you could take this. This is probably one of the first more modern Mel Brooks movies. Everybody loves Spaceballs and Robin Hood Men in Tights, and even the producers, the 2005 producers. This is really one of those movies where it's more of the modern Mel Brooks.
Which is definitely a different style.
Yes, it is a much different style. Like even Blazing Saddles to a point is more. It's more Gene Wilder. Like Gene Wilder's influence in Blazing Saddles is not as prominent as a Young Frankenstein, but I would definitely say Young Frankenstein's more of a Gene Wilder movie than a Mel Brooks movie.
Yes,
in style.
Yes.
So
Definitely.
this one is like 100% pure, more modern Mel.
Yes.
This is a lot more like how people are going to know because everybody has seen Spaceballs or the Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Spaceballs and Robin Hood Men in Tights too, I think, are very popular because there are some things in there that are a little inappropriate, but I think a lot of younger audiences like were introduced to Mel Brooks with those.
Well, definitely.
Like,
I mean,
when I grew up, those are the ones I knew. Whereas Spaceballs and Men in Tights, and we had they had the edited for TV versions that took out some of the like saucier stuff that shouldn't be for kids. We watched those movies on TV. Movies like Blazing Saddles, even High Anxiety. If you like tried to make it kid friendly, half the movie would be gone.
Oh, definitely. Especially with Blazing Saddles.
Yes.
That's a movie that's very hard to censor for television.
Yes.
But the other thing too is that one, it's a little bit more modern, so more of our generation have been exposed to that because it was definitely more popular. But also, it hits on two very key genres that most people would be more willing to watch. Like, my family's not like huge into movies, but I think the first Mel Brooks movie I saw, well, that was probably Young Frankenstein, but the second one that I saw from my family was Spaceballs because they were more interested in Star Wars. They were more interested in that kind of movie.
Right.
Sci-fi. That was kind of more along the lines of what my parents were watching. And then, as I grew up, my mom dated a guy who was really into like fantasy and stuff. So that's when I saw Robin Hood Men in Tights. So it's two of the genres that get hit a lot more. So History of the World Part 1 going back, it's very much like it's the style similar to those two movies, but it is about history. So I think also like an iconic thing is like if you're a history buff, if you're a history fan, you'll really, really appreciate this one.
That was kind of what I was getting with my good was the whole like how accurate like some of the background features are, like how much, and they get some stuff wrong, but I mean,
well,
I don't know. Some of it, it's hard to tell which of it is on purpose to be funny and how much of it's just wrong, but that's not a big deal. It's a comedy film. But the amount they get right is insane to me. Like from the time period it was built, it was probably built pretty closely to what they understood Rome to be. Yeah. What they understood caveman culture to be, what they understood the Inquisition. Like they got these things, the history of it is pretty spot on, despite the humorous nature of it.
Yeah.
So definitely. it's just fun. Like that. Yeah, that's iconic, man.
All right. Good, bad, ugly, iconic. We've hit them all. Now the challenging part.
Ooh, this one's hard for this one.
If you were, what would be like the modern day equivalent, would you say, to this kind of film? Like going back to, silent movie we talked about, like it's a different animation style or a different filming style. That's kind of what we
Blazing Saddles we talked about doing like a
superhero or
making fun of like a genre, like they did spaghetti westerns was what they made fun of. High Anxiety did
Alfred Hitchcock, and we talked about
Hitchcock
like
films.
doing like we said like Christopher Nolan was one of them, like
do a stylized parody of a director.
Yeah, like pick a director.
So the main point of this one, I think, is it's an anthology skit fest. Young Frankenstein up to this one have been like films with plots, with skits being kind of a side thing. Whereas like his first two were like very skit heavy. This is skit heavy again. It's an anthology. It does a history thing. Honestly, the best thing I can come up with, which is kind of what I think they were doing, but is similar, would be a mockumentary.
Right.
When you do a mockumentary, you take a subject or something and you make a silly documentary on it, and you take subject matter, you do history, the History of the World Part 1 is something you can actually redo. Well, by doing the same thing that they did differently. Like you just choose an entirely different set of history.
Well, they tried to. There is History of the World Part 2. They made it a TV series. It did not do very well. I haven't seen it personally, but I heard it did not do well.
The problem is it's hard to chase this same idea. You'd have to do... Well, what, did Monty Python the Holy Grail came out after this, right?
I think they're about the same time.
About the same time?
I think History of the World Part 1 might be 1980, 1981. I didn't check the time. I didn't check when the release.
Yeah, it doesn't say in our DVD collection. Okay,
well,
Blu-ray collection.
Why would it help us?
It says it on the other one for the horror stuff.
But speaking of the collection, since you kind of pointed it out, we like to kind of throw out a little blurb. Not because we're sponsored by it, not because we're actually making any money or anything off of it, but just so that you can follow along. We're watching
it does say the date on it.
Right now, the films that we've seen for the last few are coming from the Mel Brooks collection. I think it's the MGM. Is it MGM that put it together?
It is MGM. Yeah, and 20th Century Fox and MGM are
20th Century Fox, MGM, the Mel Brooks collection. It doesn't have all of his movies, but it has the majority of his movies on Blu-ray. So if you want to follow along with that, you are more than welcome to. But we like to do just like a little bit of a blurb.
I think it has everything but Dracula Dead and Loving It and the newer the original producers.
It doesn't have the original producers. It doesn't have Dracula Dead and Loving It. Life Sucks is not on that one either, and neither is the 2005 producers.
Yeah. I think that's because those were done by different studios. But yes, this is a good chunk of them, though.
Yeah, definitely. It's the majority of them. So what year was History of the World Part 1?
History of the World Part 1 was 1981.
Yep, 1981. So it was after Holy Grail, because Holy Grail 78? 75.
75.
Yep.
So, yeah, I only asked because, like, History of the World Part 1 fits in with Life of Brian and... the Holy Grail quite well. That skit based, anthology. That's what those are. There's a few of them done. Mel Brooks does. This is really good. Monty Python does a good job of this. That kind of stuff, I think, actually is making up. The closest I can actually kind of come to it in modern times is around the time of the prequel films of Star Wars. They did a mockumentary of R2-D2 and like his rise and fall from fame, and it's hilarious. It's literally like, and everybody's serious. Like, you have George Lucas literally talking about how he gave advice to R2-D2 after he left the set about what parts he could play and things he could take on, and like him literally, like, he plays like a background trash can in a film. So, like, it's hilarious, and it's like deadpan, and it's perfect. That's the kind of thing that I would do for a modern audience, is deadpanning. Because this I don't think works as well anymore. I think it also just offends too many people that they can't take it.
It offends too many people, but also the style of documentary has changed so much. This one's very classic. They have a skit, they have a whole set, and they have a guy with the grand voice, and he's speaking of the historical significance. And then they kind of have somebody play out like a skit to show this is what it looked like during the Inquisition.
It's done very much as a documentary style.
Yeah, whereas documentaries nowadays are more of that, where you have people who are interviewing and they're talking about things, and they're just like, oh man, R2-D2 would have been really good if he hadn't gotten into the drugs.
Yeah, that's literally a plot point in that mockumentary.
Yeah,
they do talk about him getting into drugs and alcohol. It's great. But you do that. You do a film style parody where it's like a modern style documentary where like you're interviewing people and stuff. That's been done too. There's actually been a few people who have done that. I think there was a vampire film that was done in that style that was actually pretty clever.
Well, yeah, they do like they've done that. SNL has done different skits where it's like they do like the back in the old days movie sports stuff.
Yeah,
it's been done.
Yeah, but that's what I would do. Just do it on history. Just do a history documentary in the modern style with humorous elements and interviews and stuff that are funny. Like that's what I would do.
Yeah, that could work. The challenging part about this, like making History of the World Part 1 for like a new audience, actually, like I think it's just culturally we're much more sensitized. We're much more sensitive to different things. So if you were trying to make a movie like this offensive about history, you would have a lot of issues with people. And I think part of the reason that History World Part 2 didn't do very well, I heard, was that they weren't really willing to go there like they did in Part 1. So it felt very disconnected. It felt more like an SNL, I think, was the comparison. It was very
too
sensitized.
safe. Yeah.
It was very safe. So I think that would be kind of challenging and difficult. You could do like the sports thing. Like there's plenty of people that do like a history of a sports team or a history of,
actually one that would work, Pharrell, the Pharrell documentary that was done with Legos.
Mhm.
That's an example of something like this. Making a comedy documentary with like a different medium. Like that would be something you could do. Like that kind of stuff. Like just clever new ways to like do a documentary would be.
well, and that would keep it modern. That would keep it to like the most recent trend, because I think that's either going to be a one hit thing or that's going to be more of a trend, doing the strange medium.
I'm kind of hopeful that kind of film will get people to do more experimental things, so stuff like this can start to come back.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that's an exact way, but like I miss Mel Brooks and Monty Python films. Like I'm not really a big fan of irreverent films, so there are parts of this one that made me a little uncomfortable, but I can deal with discomfort. Like, but some of his stuff, like Spaceballs and some of the ones we're gonna watch, and some of them like 12 Chairs. Some of these films are just fun to watch. They're hilarious. They got clever little moments, and I want to see more of that. And I'm thinking I got really excited when I saw the Pharrell Williams Lego film, because I'm like, okay, people start doing stuff like this, it's gonna be fun. Now I'm not I don't really want everyone to make a documentary out of Legos. A few people could do it. I don't mind more of them, but other mediums, like using like other stylized things to do it.
Wait, hold up. Think about this.
Oh boy.
What if somebody made an absolutely brutal history film and it was all shot in Legos or claymation? So they're reenacting the Battle of Gettysburg, but it's all either claymation or Legos. Okay. And it's like they're losing limbs. They're in the tent. They're getting like their legs amputated.
So you say Lego. That so one of the things I thought about is oh my gosh, The Patriot, when they have like the big battle right at the beginning of the movie, and then the like guy gets his head removed by a cannonball, like that, but like with claymation would almost be hilarious.
Yeah. So maybe that could work. But anyway, we've digressed. We've kind of fallen away. We've lost the plot.
I don't think so. I think we just I mean we're done, but I just think that I want to see more clever. I want to see people do what he did with a documentary style film.
Yeah, this
anthology.
Is very fun,
I want to see this idea applied more often in modern film, and we're starting to get that. And the best thing I could think of was the Lego thing, because it's a unique way to do something like this. Just stuff like that, because there's historical actresses. We talked about it. You could learn quite a bit of history of this and get excited about it from this movie. A movie like this to get you excited about history is clever. Yeah. I want more of that. Get people into stuff.
It would be nice to have more fun history. History has kind of been... History is one of those topics that I think it's extremely important, but is taught so blandly that most people hate it. It's like reading. Like when you force a kid to read in high school, they learn to hate reading. And then they rediscover reading when they start actually being able to read stuff that they actually enjoy, that's actually like age appropriate. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is actually really fun.
Turns out I don't hate reading. I just hate the books that I was assigned to read. Yeah, that's how I feel about history.
And so it's the same with history. History is one of those things where it can be very bland. It can be very, another slideshow, another textbook, another memorizing of a date. But personally, just like, I love history. And there's a lot of stuff that you can learn from history as long as you are able to experience it in either a very fun and engaging way, or you find something that hits like one of your interests.
Yep, exactly.
So an actual like fun history show would be a good idea. Not necessarily like that's different than like Mel Brooks, but still, it's one of those things. Like there's even a scene in this movie, just to continue on this rant, But there's a scene in this movie where they introduce the Spanish Inquisition, and that scene always gets me to be like, I don't know a lot about this era, but it's unique enough and it's interesting enough. I kind of want to know a little bit more. Even though, yes, he does this funny skit, he does this funny thing. It's just like, this is an era of history I don't know very well.
Especially when he
get a book. I should probably look into this more.
Yeah,
that could be interesting.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, we've digressed. We have moved on. Speaking of moving on, it's hard for us to move forward and move on without your guys' constant feedback and support. Please be sure to let us know your thoughts about History of the World Part 1 in the comments below. Also, let us know what are some things that you guys look forward to as we continue this series, or even like a suggestion for the next series as we're wrapping up Mel Brooks. We have our own ideas, but if there's something you guys are interested in, we'll find a way to kind of squeeze that into the schedule. We always love talking about movies, watching different movies, so just let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Leave us a like if you like this video. Otherwise, subscribe if you haven't already, and share us with your friends if they like movies too. They'll probably like this channel. So without further ado, we'll see you guys in the next video.
Thanks for watching.